All right. Hi there, I'm Kristin McGuire. I'm the Director of Governmental Relations at TCASE, Texas Council of Administrators of Special Education. And we're here today to go through our experiences with students with exceptionalities and the services that they receive in public schools and the effect that COVID has had on those experiences and those services, and how various groups and various roles are moving forward to meet the challenges that we're still in today. So we're filming this in October of 2020. So we've had a couple of months under our belts with school starting for this year. And so I wanted to start with just introducing our panel so that you guys can get an idea of where everybody is from. Again, the kind of purpose of this video is to highlight the different types of services that students receive in public schools, from gifted and talented education services to students with disabilities that may have an accommodation plan, who are protected under Section 504, as well as students with disabilities who receive services under federal law. Throughout this COVID pandemic, when we closed in March, essentially we have had declarations from the federal government and the federal government Department of Education is the entity that essentially enforces the laws associated with educating students with disabilities and those that receive IEPs or have IEPs, individual education programs. And we've heard understanding from the Department of Education that it is challenging to continue to provide the services that students need remotely and in this challenging time. But there are no, of course, exemptions or waivers to the federal statutes in terms of evaluating students for services as well as serving students. So we have a group here that's really, going to talk about their experiences of how they've kind of overcome these obstacles and some that are still occurring. So, and then, alternatively with your gifted education, typically that's very locally driven in districts. So a lot of parents have very, very different experiences associated with the services that their students receive. So we'll kind of hear from that end as well as far as initiatives to continue, challenging services for that. So I want to go ahead and have our panel introduce themselves really quick. Debbie, I'm going to start with you, and if you'll just tell us who you are and where you work, and really the role that you serve for TAGT.
Okay, my name is Debbie Smith. I work for San Marcos Consolidated Independent School District. I'm a coordinator with Advanced Academics, GT, 504, and RTI. It's a smaller district, and I'm currently the board president for TAGT.
Thank you very much. And Monica, how about you?
My name is Monica Willis. I'm actually a parent representative for TAGT, and I work for a company called McGuire Inc. I have two children.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah. Talk about your children.
Yes, I have two children. I have one that is identified as gifted, and I have another one that is on a protected 504 plan.
Okay, great. And then Anna, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, my name's Anna Smith, and I'm a parent in Leander ISD to 4 students, and they are all gifted. I do have 2 children who receive special education services here in Leander ISD. My oldest has autism, scoliosis, and an upper limb birth defect, and he's also 2E. And Jack has autism, and he was labeled intellectually delayed. And he's also 2E as well.
Awesome, thank you. And then Shelley, will you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Shelley Copple. I'm a special education teacher in Leander ISD. I work with one of Anna's, her oldest child at Leander High School. So he's one of my tracking students.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining us. And I wanted to talk just a little bit about kind of experiences. Debbie, you've got the experience, of course, as an administrator within your district, and really the variety of, you've got your response to intervention, 504, advanced academics, and you have your experience as the board president at TAGT. Can you talk a little bit about some, challenges, of course, that you faced with COVID, and really statewide what TAGT has launched in terms of initiatives to help with services, and really just to try to work with parents to ensure that services continue?
Sure. So starting with the first part of your question, as far as challenges that we faced, well, the challenges were similar across programs, but yet very different at the same time. So, you're always concerned about those special programs meeting the needs of students when they're not in the classroom. And that can look very much the same for GT students as it does for students with the 504 plan, or students who are supported through RTI. Because in many instances, a pull-out intervention is utilized. And if they are not available to pull out, it makes it more difficult. So looking at alternative ways to meet their needs without making it extra work for them is probably across the board a challenge in all of those programs. Working with our GT specialists to serve as collaborators, coaches, and co-teachers in some instances to help make sure that the rigor is infused into lesson plans on a regular basis. We also have AVID in our district, which helps those scaffolding strategies and things. And that also works for 504 and RTI kids because it helps implement those strategies district-wide. So really looking for making sure we're staying equitable across these programs amongst these COVID challenges, and trying to recognize when we see some COVID slide. We're in the process of screening kids now to make a plan for how we can address that and inform parents. And then as the board president for TAGT, I'm a sitting member of the Commissioners Advisory Council for TEA, and we've worked to develop resources that can give some guidance to districts, interpretations through an FAQ, which kind of explains how the state plan should still be implemented even though we're in this pandemic time, making sure that we're advocating for these students and what their needs are as far as testing. Testing may not look like it always looked, but how can we test these kids in this environment? Encouraging that out of the box thinking so that districts are understanding we're going to support you when you're looking for solutions. What we're not really supporting is not trying to come up with a solution. So that's probably the bulk of what we've been doing.
Great. And what do you think would, if parents have students who are identified as gifted and receiving services, what would kind of be the downfall of, not receiving them, or, perhaps, withdrawing from a public school? What would they be missing not receiving those gifted services?
I think one of the biggest concerns, I'm assuming that question was for me. I think one of the biggest concerns is the SEL component, social emotional learning component, because that can be very prevalent across all of these programs, but with the gifted student in particular, if they're isolated because maybe for some reason they are remote and they can't come to school, they have difficulty sometimes with the social aspect anyway. So in some cases that might be good for them, but in other cases, it just doesn't allow them to grow in those areas that they need to socially and emotionally. And so there's always the fear of them not having the engagement that they need to have so that they want to continue learning. There's always a fear of them going underground and not wanting to learn anymore, shutting down, feeling like there's nothing here for me. I've already exhausted. I know everything they're fixing to teach me. So if we're not still going ahead with pre-assessments and trying to figure out what they learn, and working with GT specialists to help develop project-based learning, even via Zoom or whatever it may look like, something that can be modified to meet their needs and keep them engaged, because many of them struggle with that when school is normal. So when you have these new adverse conditions, if you're not looking for ways to keep them engaged, there's potential that they will either go look to try to learn somewhere else or just completely drop out and disengage.
Right. And I think the pieces of the requirements in terms of gifted and talented education, 504, RTI, those required benchmarks in terms of progress monitoring and figuring out, okay, well, here's where the student is now. So let's raise the bar, let's make this goal, or let's do this challenge, or, you're measuring, consistently progress of the student, where if you didn't have that, of course, within the school system, if you were at home, obviously we wouldn't have as formalized a process for that. So thank you. Anna, I want to go to you and Shelley, and I want to, Anna, if you could just kind of give I know you talked about a little bit about your children who are in Leander ISD, and Shelley in particular teaches your high schooler, or is involved with your high schooler. And so I want to talk just a little bit about your experience in terms of, when COVID hit, what challenges did you face personally within the home? And then what challenges did you face with the various schools that your children go to?
So I'm not going to lie, when COVID hit, I kind of freaked out because I do have 4 kids, but 2 of them do have services. And we were actually in the middle of fighting for services for my youngest. So we're in this limbo state with him. So going into COVID with him with no set definite plans and knowing that we're arguing about his disability kind of created some friction, but it also exposed a lot of certain things like social skills classes were not being taught through. So it gave us an opportunity to see what was not happening at school and to be able to, call in an emergency ARD, even if we're in this limbo stage, and be able to supplement there. Now, as for my oldest, I'm not going to lie. I wish everyone had what we had at LHS. They picked right back off. We actually had our ARD in the middle of it. And, Kristin knows and Shelley knows our experience. We've had a rough, it was 8 years to get to where we're at. And so I still going into an ARD, even though I am educated on the matters and I trust our team, I still go to every ARD stressed out and worried that we're going to lose those services. And, having my youngest, his issue is almost a deja vu for me. So I've got that going, but we had our ARD in the middle of COVID and I was expecting to lose services. And instead I'm getting, hey, well, let's try this next year because, it might be a little different. So being able to have that relationship, and most importantly, I feel like we have a team of teachers on my oldest team who are there to truly advocate for his future and are going to try to do what's best for him, even with the COVID restrictions. So we are virtual. So when school started, we decided to go virtual. My oldest is immune compromised. And it's like, again, amazing. Like we had some issues, and Shelley can also talk about this as well. But I think for me as a parent, it was hard going into this because I usually have a staffing at the beginning of the year because I want to know our teachers. And so it was hard for me to be able to trust Shelley because Shelley told me, like, this is my job, is to go to these teachers, to tell them your child's IEP, to explain his accommodations, his quirks. And for me as a parent, because of our past, it was very hard for me to let that go because I wanted to email them. I wanted to meet with them, but I also understood that this is not normal times and our teachers are overwhelmed. And I did not want to be that parent, when they're trying to adjust their entire curriculum to online learning. So that was hard for me because I have 2 kids in services, one in elementary and one in high school. And I'm getting this like top treatment, I like to call it, at our high school level because they're, trying to make sure Steven's, situated. And we did have a hiccup this year. Steven, I'm so proud to say, like, our high school is so accommodating when it comes to extracurricular activities. And he's in varsity choir this year. He got a Letterman's jacket. And if you would have told me that would have happened, y'all are going to make me cry. This would have happened 4 years ago. I would have told you that's not true because, we had this child failing and now he's in varsity choir speaking and it's just amazing. But virtual choir didn't work with him and he was ready to quit. And I went to Shelley and, I have 4 kids. I think I know everything about parenting, but this is where she really played she helped me help him because he finally understood, like, this is temporary. I could tell him, just seeing it's fine. And he didn't understand that. And Shelley was able to come in and be like, hey, let's figure out a solution here. You don't want to give this up. This helped you find your voice. And, you're getting your Letterman's jacket. And my child just didn't understand the importance of a Letterman's jacket. And somehow Shelley made her magic work. And so Stephen goes up to choir just for choir. And it's funny because he was struggling with grades. And once he was able to get that online, that choir interaction, that outlet for him, his grades shot right back up. So, I mean, we've had such a great experience at our high school level, but our youngest, it's, we do get 30 seesaw emails a day, and he doesn't do the seesaws. He's not turned in any work. And it's, at this point, I'm just kind of like, let's pick and choose our battles. And for me, it's like, I know if I can just get him through this year, I know next year will be better. And then if we can't get through the elementary year, it's just going to be what we happened with Stephen. We'll get to middle school and everything will be okay. So, I mean, it's frustrating because I'm on the ends of both worlds, but I also know that there's a lot more backstory with Jack, so we'll fix it. But it's been a challenging time, but we're getting through it.
Yeah. Well, Shelley, what do you think is, what have you learned through this experience, and what do you think is the difference that you guys are making at the high school to make Anna's son succeed?
I think in this case in particular, it's just, and I guess with all my students, it's what do we need to do to make the student successful? And it really and truly has to be individualized. What is working with Stephen is not going to work with, I have 21 tracking kids. It's not going to work with all of them. And so you really, I think it goes back to relationships with your students, just knowing them. And that's so important, because if you don't know like what their interests are, what makes them happy, or where they struggle, then you're not going to have these creative solutions when things like this pop up. So I think so much of what works, with me and Stephen is that I know him, and part of it's just talking to him. Part of it's talking to his teachers. Part of it is knowing Anna and talking with Anna, and knowing when they have concerns, they'll say, hey, Shelley, can you help us with this? Or we're seeing this, can you help us? And I'll say, yep, let's talk about it. And then I go back to Stephen, and at this point, he's a sophomore. He's 2 years away from not being in her house and being at school with me. So it's, Stephen, this is the issue. What do we need to do? Like, what can you do? What can I do? And you need to learn how to solve this, right? So it's, I think part of it too is empowering him to have that decision and have, go through that process and learn how to do it. And, he's old enough now, so he can be a part of that team too. And I think that's where the buy-in with him has been successful, because he does have a voice at the table, and he does have a voice in his art. And when we were going through this with choir at the beginning of the year, I was just like, Stephen, what is the issue? And it finally got to where he said, I don't like to hear myself sing by myself. Okay, let's fix that, right? And so talking with him, we go to the teacher, we talk to the teacher, what can we do? They know it's a struggle. So we say, can he come to school? Can he come to school for this one period? Yeah, of course, right? So it's really just figuring out the root of the problem, and then figuring out how do we solve it? And we do.
Right. And I think, I think that that's a perfect example of, sure, there are legal requirements that you have to follow when you have a student or a child identified with an exceptionality or disability. And, so there are legal requirements, sure, but it's not about that. It's about finding out, what the student needs to be successful. It's about, we got to get this art done to be in compliance with this date, but we haven't done any inventories, we haven't done any progress monitoring. It's about finding out the student. And I think you guys have really worked on communicating that. So I want to go back and kind of follow up with you, Anna, in terms of kind of the differences in your experiences too, is what does the high school in this case do differently in terms of promoting that communication or conversation that you might not get at another, at your elementary. So essentially, what do you wish all schools and all teachers and all principals would do?
So I'm a little biased because I love our principal. There's a story. He was our principal when we walked into Wiley when we were fighting to get services, and he's seen Stephen. He saw Stephen that first day not wanting to get out of that car, and he made that connection. And for me, and this is, Kristin and Shelley know, like, my biggest goal for our district is to try to get the consistency across the district, because there's pockets of strong SPED admin at this campus and strong admin at this campus. And it's not necessarily that my campus, my elementary campus, she's not strong, because she's been so receptive. We talk, we're trying to figure it out. But we all know it comes down to resources, and it comes down to department heads. And I feel very lucky right now in Leander, because we're going through such a transformation. And with the copier report, I really feel like once we get once we complete those committees, and for those that don't know, the copier report, I'm so proud to say I was able to advocate our district to have an outside firm come in and do, not per se an audit, but find holes in our social education system in Leander ISD. And it's been a really awesome parent collaboration that we've been doing. And they found 7 different recommendations to help. And now we're all split up into different committees. So it's been really awesome to see this. And we're playing a part of this. But back to your question, what I'd like to see is what we have at LHS, a strong principal who understands, most importantly, the value of inclusion, but he doesn't vilify parents for being an advocate. And I think that's the biggest thing here, is that there's a lot of preconceived notions that when a parent is in an ARD and they're, we're passionate because, this is our kids' education and our future. And when you're met with this hostility of, it's very, well, why is she mad? And, for me, I always bring it back to like, hey, I'm a parent just like you. Remember, if this was your kid, you'd be doing the same thing. So again, I think it just goes back to having a principal who understands, I think, and I'm so lucky that we have Chris Simpson.
Yeah, and I think, kind of going back to, being an advocate for your child and the parent and different kind of relationships that might develop in, with your schools and with the staff. I think that, what the benefit of this, of being a member and being an advocate in your district right now is, you were able to advocate for that audit. It's brought the district, it was very clear, as evidenced from that report when the district received it, that there were some initiatives that really needed to happen. And a lot of that report really was consistency around the district and communication with parents, relationships with parents. And so, Anna's been part of a group to kind of come up with a special ed PTA as well. And so, luckily that district is kind of embracing the partnership opportunities and having tough conversations when it's not working. So, I think that's definitely a benefit of although you've had those really negative experiences, at least it's turning into change. So appreciate that. So Monica, you have 2 children. You said one is identified as gifted and one has an accommodation plan under 504. Can you talk a little bit about your experiences in the public school system as far as, how did your kids get identified for these services, and any bumps along the way, of course, during COVID as well, and how you went through them?
Well, actually, both of my children started off in the private school, and they were there for a good portion of their elementary years. And in the middle of elementary, I transitioned them into public. Immediately, my son was identified. He was sought out and tested, and he was identified, and he went into the GT program. He's been there ever since, and working with a lot of other kids that are similar to him. My daughter continues going to school as a regular student, and the longer she was in school, the more we started seeing something was wrong, but didn't know why. In the district that I'm in, Fort Bend ISD, they test early on for people, for her, she's dyslexic. They test early on for that. And so with her being in the later grades for elementary, she was doing well. Her grades were good. And it was just something that wasn't right. And her teacher, it was actually one of her teachers that worked with me and helped me get to the point of trying to figure out what was going on. I had to do a lot of legwork myself outside of the school, but ultimately we were able to get her assessed. And it wasn't until her first year in middle school that she was officially put on the 504 plan, and everything came back with all of her assessments that she truly was dyslexic. But it took a while for her. There were a lot of struggles, a lot of bumps along the way because it didn't happen early on. And again, unfortunately, it was because we were not in the public school system at that time. But since then, Fort Bend ISD has been wonderful. Number one, again, it was a teacher that helped me through this to get her assessed. But since she's been assessed, the services they provided have been amazing. From the extra classes she was able to take to start learning how to cope with dyslexia and work with it. And while her grades were still good, it took her a long time to read and write. For assignments she was given, a student may complete an hour, and it would take her 2 and 3 hours. She'd have to read a book 2 and 3 times to understand what was going on. Her assessments on any of the standardized tests, you can see the difference between her math, which was out of the ballpark, and her reading, which was barely there. And it took a while, and they worked with her. And then also we hit COVID. So that scared me. For her, we were right in the middle of all of her out classes and working with her teacher. And then COVID hit, so I was wondering what was going to happen. And luckily, it was what she learned in these out classes that helped her. Mm-hmm. It taught her how to look outside the box and be resourceful. And she started doing more research and figuring out, how do I study? We're virtual. We're still virtual. We didn't make the choice to go back into the school. But she's learned so many different ways to truly learn while she's on the computer. Initially, it was hard for her because being dyslexic, you have your overlays and you have your glasses and other things that can help you get the words not to jump all around and to see what you need to see. So she had to learn how to look at the computer and answer questions and work through the computer. That was a little hard at first, but now she's finding ways to do it. So it's been good for her. It was a struggle at first with COVID when it came through. We didn't know how to take that, but she's back at it. She's excelling. She's still in AP classes. She's still making A's, but she's had to learn how to adjust. For my son, it was sort of what was said earlier. His adjustment when it came to COVID was socialism. And being able to be social and with other students and things of that nature, because they have an opportunity to get together in teams. And that was his one time to mix and mingle with other students that were similar to him and to have those conversations and to do the group thing. So that's where he struggled at first. It's better now that everyone has teams and you're able to go back and talk to people and have your groups and do the things that you need to do. But initially it was that. It was keeping him challenged, and it was being able to have his opportunity to be with other students. So that's where everything came for him.
Right. Well, and I want to go back to kind of what you said initially in terms of when your son, was kind of fairly immediately tested, and then you struggled with your daughter just feeling like something wasn't right and she wasn't progressing. So, what's something that you would advise parents in terms of when they have students in the public school system and they're not aware of, most parents say, well, what's 504? What's special education? I don't know what those mean. I don't even know how to ask for that. So do you have advice for parents who just feel like something additional needs to be done by the district, and how you would advocate for that?
You have to ask questions and don't be afraid to ask. It is difficult at first when you're working with people and you're telling people to and you're trying to figure out what's wrong and what's different about your child and how you can help it and how you can fix it, you have to keep asking questions. You have to keep doing the research. Talk to the people in the schools. They are there to help you, and they are willing to. I know in Fort Bend ISD, it just took a matter of me asking questions and reaching out to the right people, and they directed me the entire way of what to do and how to do it, what to expect, what sites to go to. They even gave me outside organizations that I can become a part of to learn more about what was going on with my daughter. I didn't have a clue about any of it, but you just have to be open and willing to accept what's coming your way and ask a bunch of questions. That is the advice I would give to people. And don't stop trying. When you know something's wrong, go with your gut, your intuition, and follow it.
Yeah. And I think, you know, alternatively, I think if you were to have kept your children in private school, do you think that, you know, I mean, you know, private schools aren't typically held to the federal requirements under, you know, the education statutes and civil rights laws. So I just wonder, are you, you know, thankful you made the move then to public school?
Actually, I am, and I wouldn't say anything negative about a private school.
Right.
It was a great start for my children. The only difference between the private and the public that I experienced was that when I walked into the public school, there were so many more programs and resources that were available that I didn't even know existed. And if it wasn't for me walking into the public school, I would have never known that my daughter was dyslexic. My son being gifted, that I knew, and that was assessed already. I knew that was there. I never knew my daughter had the dyslexia and that this was something she was going to have to learn how to cope with the rest of her life. That was a blessing for me walking into public school.
Right, right. Awesome. Well, thank you. Anna, I wanted to also just follow up and ask you that same question in terms of, you know, if you're a parent and you have a student in public school and you're concerned, what would kind of be your advice for purposes of, you know, requesting help?
Find me. I'm just kidding.
Well, yeah, that is true.
You know, so when we moved here in 2016, I came from Evanston, Illinois, and we had a program like this. And so what I envisioned in 2017 was to create a parent group where parents could be at each campus, and parents like me who, you know, were new to Texas and didn't understand Texas special education laws could have a representative on their campus. And so Kristin and Shelley know, like, this has been a dream of mine since 2017, is to create this working group. And that's, I mean, that's I guess that's what it is creating this working group where parents feel empowered, but most importantly is like you're working in collaboration with your district. And it's 4 years. It took 4 years for this to happen because we had to break down a lot of, you know, stereotypes of parents wanting to come in and sue the district. And then also parents extremely angry. I mean, I was one of those at the table, and I had to put my own biases aside. And I'm just so happy to say, like, what we're creating in Leander is I'm helping other districts across Central Texas. We started a special education coalition group, and I'm helping, you know, it's actually through PTAs, through Round Rock PTA, Dripping Spring. So it's what I'd like to see is a similar program like that across the district. But it, you know, it's got to be a culture change. It's got to be a culture change on how we view inclusion in special education. So I guess for me is, you know, find me. No. But, you know, just find, I guess, you know, just find. It's hard because nothing like that exists. You know, I hope there's parents out there that will see what we're doing here in Leander and, you know, realize that as a mom of 4 kids who is incredibly busy, we could still find a way to come together and make our voice heard. So I don't know if that really answered the question.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think exactly what Monica said, you keep asking questions and you keep finding people to ask questions, and you just keep on it and
build your tribe, I guess, you know. And I mean, look what we have now. We've got this, you know, 67 parent advocates across the district. And what I love about it is it's parents I've not seen before speaking up and are finally feeling empowered to speak up. And I just think that that's the most powerful thing for me in all of this, is just, you know, being able to have that conversation without everyone getting angry. So.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's definitely, I think, you know, the biggest lesson I think that for COVID and life after COVID and all of that in terms of education is it just completely reinforced and just slams this, like you have to communicate and have good relationships between the school and the parents and your students. And so I think that this really did bring to light some, some areas of kind of inadequacy in that respect, and then how to change that. And like Shelley, you were just kind of talking about, you just had to adapt. You have to adapt to the virtual world. You have to, figure out kind of the root cause if a student is struggling. So is there anything that you would say, Shelley, any other kind of lessons learned, or perhaps any positive consequences of, what we've experienced with COVID?
I think the first part of that question, I think if you always just lead with what is going to get the best outcome for my student, what is best for the student overall, you can't get in trouble. So there's lots of times where like people say, oh, you can't do that, you can't, and I'm like, why? It's what the student needs. So when I just, go with that focus, it's okay. So that's step one, is just, you got to do right by your student. And then step two, I think the biggest takeaway I've had is with Zoom calls, and with most of my students are virtual. So I've had to find unique ways to build connections when I can't be like, oh, I really like your shoes today, or what's on your shirt? Tell me, I can't do all that stuff. So you get different experiences. And one of my favorite things that I've had is we had bring your pet, and all my students brought their pets, and one had a lizard on their shoulder, one had a cat and dog. And so you can still find out things about your kids, and you can still get to know them. You just got to do it differently. And I think it's just allowing yourself that freedom to get out of everything you've ever done, and just kind of like use what you have, because that's all we can do. Right. So, you see things in their backgrounds or in their room, just ask them about it, just like you would if they were in your classroom. You can still build the same connections.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And Debbie, what about, you were talking about kind of the social emotional learning aspect of all of this. So what kind of additional kind of initiatives or things have we thought about now that we're in, a virtual world and, for some in-person world? So how do we continue to advance that social emotional learning and that collaboration?
I think, the time to train teachers, the optimal time is kind of past, but there's still things out there that you can find. There's ways to infuse things into a daily curriculum and do a health check, do a team meeting, a class meeting. Really just kind of, sometimes your Zoom class may be about what's going on with you today. How are things going? Maybe those conversations when you see that kids aren't turning things in, what can I help you with? Making those connections like Shelley was talking about, because that need for connection is so important. And some kids are home, not because they want to be there, but because there's someone that's sick, or that has one of the pre-existing conditions, things that they have to be concerned about sending kids out. But that kid is not thriving because they're not there. So trying to find those ways to engage them in the classroom with others through maybe breakout rooms, where they can really get into some conversations about things that are meaningful, not just level 1 questions that are yes, no answers or knowledge level kinds of questions, but really finding ways for them to engage with each other and making it current and relevant and authentic to the extent possible helps them feel more connected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that's great. Anything else that anybody wants to share in terms of their experience and, with their children or with their experience within the public school system?
I just want to say, from my previous hat as an administrator, I'm sorry, I just jumped in there. I'm really liking what I'm hearing as far as the parents, the way they're responding to teachers and talking to teachers, because so often you hear parents that to some degree, they don't own some of what they should own as far as, okay, my child isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing. I realize that, but aside from that, what can we still do for him? This is just a great example of good teamwork, and nobody's looking to blame anyone. They just want to help the child. And I have just enjoyed so much hearing just what Shelley said about if you start from a place of what's best for the child, you can't find fault with that. So I've just really enjoyed this teamwork that I've heard you guys describe. It's wonderful.
Good. Anything else, Monica, Anna, or Shelley?
One thing I was going to add is what I love about being able to do Zoom ARDS, because it's our only way to do ARDS right now, is that anyone can join. I sent out paperwork to all, I had a student ARD and sent out, surveys to teachers. How is the student doing? And I had 2 teachers that weren't supposed to be a part of the meeting say, hey, can I have the Zoom link and hop in? I really want to celebrate this kid in the meeting. And I was like, what? Since when do I have teachers begging me to come to meetings? I loved it. And so I think that was one of our unexpected surprises of Zoom is anyone can hop in from anywhere for a few minutes and then leave. And it was such a positive impact.
Oh, that's good. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
This is Monica. If I could add anything to that as well, I would say one of the things that I am loving about it is that the students are getting more teacher-student time now that they're on virtual and on virtual settings and teams. They're having an opportunity to actually talk to their teachers and chat with their teachers, and they're emailing their teachers more, and they're really getting that connection more so than they did when they were in the classroom. So if you found a rainbow or silver lining of what's going on, since people are still sitting at home, many of them, some are going back to school, is that they are learning in different ways. And many of these students are finding that this new way of learning is helping them be better students, be better prepared for their future, whether it's high school, college, or beyond.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think the same thing for teachers. I think it's made them better teachers. I think, no one ever expected to be in this, situation that we're in, but I think that, it has definitely enhanced this idea of, well, I need to make sure I can teach in all these different types of environments, and, my assignments need to reflect, kind of differentiation in terms of what students turn in. So, Anna, any last words?
I think for me in all of this as a parent, personally, it's allowed me to trust our school district. I have baggage, and this has been, it's allowed me to allow myself to chill out, I guess. But overall, it makes me appreciate my district so much. Like, I feel, knowing that I've seen the good and the bad and I'm still fighting, I still see the willingness from his teachers and from my oldest teachers and just from the district in general, trying to find solutions with the, limited budget and resources, but are willing to take a chance with this parent collaboration and listen. So I think for me in all of this is I'm just so excited in this trying time to see our community grow and our community really lean on each other. So I think that's probably the positive is we got our little group, and I love it. Good things are coming.
Awesome. Good. Well, I'm so glad to hear that. And all of you, I appreciate your time so much. I know it's getting late in the evening now. So I appreciate your time, and appreciate everything you do as a parent, as a board president, as a board member. And, Anna, I think I can't even name all your hats, so I'm not even going to try, but appreciate you guys so much. And thank you for joining us today.